Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to join us here today. I certainly saw a number of some great friends that have checked in, and I'm certainly excited that you were able to be a part of this. Today's topic is on referee mechanics. And I would say this is really kind of geared for, three groups of individuals here. Possibly somebody who is looking to become a referee, is just getting started and wants to kind of learn some basics and, what those referee mechanics are. Also, this is great for, those of you that are maybe national referees and are looking to make that next step to become an international referee. So I think this will be a great webinar for you as well. And then, as always, I think this is still just a great reminder for those of you that are international referees and are looking to maybe take that next step and want to continue to be one of the best in the world. I saw a number of the names on the list, and there's a number of just outstanding referees that are joining us here today. So again, I think this is sometimes just some great reminders for some things to consider as you continue on that journey. It's certainly always a work in progress, and we're always looking for ways to get better. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. First off, kind of getting started, I want to just a little housekeeping. If you have any questions that come up during the course of the webinar, at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A button. So simply write your question there. And I know I've responded back to a few of you who joined in early just to say hello, and it's always great to see you. But if you have any questions over the course, please feel free to write those in that area. I will, at the end of the webinar, I'll go through and answer as many questions as I can. Also, kind of as we go through this, I do want to kind of keep these questions really geared towards referee mechanics and the topics that we talk about. So I don't want to get too off base, because there's certainly always lots of questions and lots of things to discuss, but we'll try to keep those questions on referee mechanics and how things operate. As we get started, one of the things I'd like to do here quickly is to run a poll just to find out where everybody's coming in from. And I also have an additional question too, as to what your current role is. And in that, you can actually select multiple parts, like, are you a referee, a national referee, international referee, or coach, or maybe other. Maybe you're checking in as a fan or a national, you work for the National Federation. But I'll give you a few seconds here to click in that. And again, there's certainly, with the second question, you can choose more than one. I know, for example, I would consider myself into three categories here between national referee, international referee, and coach. So give you another 10 seconds here. We'll kind of close the polling and see what our results are. Certainly a large percentage here of. So here you can see, so again, a majority of people checking in from Asia and Europe. So that's outstanding. So I appreciate you, making being here with us today. And then again, you can see here, looking at majority here are national and international referees. So that's outstanding, and some coaches and part of this as well. So I think that's great. I think as a coach, I think it's anytime you can learn more about, how the referees work, what the rules are, how the referees are interpreting the rules. I think those are just outstanding, ways to continue to learn. So. All right, next thing I want to do is share my screen here. So I'm going to click over. And so the first thing I'd like to kind of open up with is we are getting started, or should be opening here soon, with the United World Wrestling Academy, which is an online educational website. And so we're really excited about this, working through some technical issues just to make sure we get it uploaded and it's running correctly when we do this. But this should be coming very soon. So I would encourage you to continue to check the United World Wrestling website and also through social media accounts when this is available and launched. But you will find, just a series of educational resources. There'll be an introduction to referee course. There's also going to be an introduction to coaching and safety, which is the first coaching course we'll have, and we'll be adding more over time. But there's also a few other courses like Ready to Wrestle and also an online rules course. So I encourage you to take advantage of this and when this is launched, but please be on the lookout for that as we go. today, really kind of the quick objectives of what we want to cover and kind of go through here is first just kind of, overall in general, we're looking at the how can we improve procedures of referees. So that'll be kind of the overlying major topic here. And we'll be looking at that by, our proper, completion of the bout sheet, how we fill bout sheets out, and just some things to consider, and a little bit of maybe, mechanics or helpful hints for those of you that are, working as a mat chairman or judge. The UWW vocabulary, the importance of that, communicating with wrestlers. For those of you that were able to listen to the Referee Commission webinar on Monday on freestyle passivity, they did a great job really talking about how the importance of being able to communicate with the wrestler. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that, I know that'll be available as well. So I would encourage you to go watch that with Evo and Nona as they went through the process for freestyle passivity. Also, proper hand signals for referees. We'll also look at how to properly start and end matches, and then kind of the correct procedure for calling a fall or a pin. So that's what we hope to cover. By the end of the time, hopefully we'll have learned a little bit about that, or just even reviewed. I know some of you, there's a number of 1S referees on this, so you're fairly familiar with all of these things. The first question here is, what are referee mechanics? When you saw the webinar title, you're like, okay, what does that fall under? What are we looking at? And just in general, this is the procedure that's used during a match. What the referees do to perform their jobs, whether it's the referee, the judge, or the mat chairman, there's procedures that they follow that help them be able to do their job better. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. And as I mentioned before, these are some of those topics and areas that we're going to be looking at. We'll go into some of these in detail, and we'll go into some of these with some video as well. Hopefully. Yep. All right, first thing up here is bout sheet responsibilities. And the first place we want to talk about here is just the fact that this falls under the mat chairman and judge's responsibility. So on any given match, you certainly could be in any of those positions. And it's your job to be able to fill out that bout sheet correctly. Now, depending on where you're at, maybe depends on how much you use bout sheets. I know, for example, myself at the national level, we don't use bout sheets quite like this because so much of our scoring is done electronically that we may just have like a very simple bout sheet that we just kind of keep for our notation, but not an official bout sheet because those results are recorded on the computer. But for those of you that are looking to become an international referee or are already an international referee, you certainly have to be able to fill these out. And the importance of getting these filled out correctly and making sure that not only the judge and the mat chairman's match, but making sure that those results are exactly the same that are in the computer system as well. So certainly this is the two individuals that we're focusing on here with this part. Also, from just a mechanics perspective, using paddles or the scoring system. Anytime you're using paddles to score your points, it's important a couple of things. Number one, make sure you hold those things up as high as you possibly can. So that way the mat chairman is able to see those if you're the judge, or really just for the coaches and spectators to know what you scored. So don't hold those directly in front of your body. Make sure you get those up above your head. Also, in my opinion, I think it's important that whenever you have a scoring sequence, that you hold the paddles up in the sequence that they scored. So if you went 4 red, you go 4 red, then you hold up 2 blue. So you're holding those up in order so everybody knows that the order that they score, because the order can be important at the end of the match. But the only time you're going to be holding 2 paddles up at the same time is typically just for cautions. When you have a caution in 1 or a caution in 2, you're holding those up at the same time. If you have an opportunity or you use a scoring system like an electronic system, and I think I mentioned this earlier, it's so important to make sure that you hold down the score that you have for an extended period of time, because sometimes it's difficult, as I know as a mat chairman, to look over because scoring happens so fast and you don't take your eyes off and you look up and you're like, did the judge score anything? And that's because they press the button really quickly. So don't be afraid to hold the button down until you've got eye contact with the mat chairman so they know they can see what the score was. So those are a little tougher to use and probably not as common, but using the paddles or bats are certainly more common in that process. One thing that I would encourage everybody to do, just some helpful mechanics, at least things that have helped me in the past, there's really two things. Number one, anytime I have the bout sheet, typically I actually I scoot my chair a little bit further away from the table. And it's not too far away, I can still be able to write. But by sliding back farther, that allows me to still have a better peripheral vision. If I'm really close and I have my bout sheet and there's a scoring action and I look down to score and write it down, I essentially blocked my view. So I can't tell what happens. If I scoot back just a little bit, I can see the points, I can write down the points, but I can still see movement out of my peripheral vision to help catch my eyes better. So if something happens, I won't miss it. And on the same sense, the other thing that's certainly been very helpful for me is whenever I'm watching a situation, let's say there's a takedown. All right, they scored 2. I don't write down the 2 on my bout sheet until I have a good break, because many times there'll be a takedown and they'll be right to a turning situation. And so if I'm writing down the 2, there's a chance I might miss the turn. And I've seen this on numerous occasions where there's a takedown, there's a 2, and there's 2 quick turns. But because the judge or match chairman, they scored the 2 points, okay? They wrote down the 2, they looked up, and they only saw the second turn, not the first one. So they only look at it as, well, it was 2 and 2, instead of there being 3 2s because they missed one of the turns. So a lot of times I won't take my eyes off the action until the situation is done, and then I will write the points on the bout sheet. I try to make sure if there's a series of like quick turns, sometimes I'll just make little marks on the paper to remember how many there were, or I may count them out loud. Okay, there was 1, there's 2, there's 3. All right, we had 3 turns. So we had a takedown and 3 turns. And then I go to the bout sheet and write that down. So those are just some helpful mechanics that I've used in the past that I think can help you in this process. The one thing we're also going to take a look at here is basic notation, like writing, what we write on the bout sheet, and then also just the areas to be completed. So let's take a look at that. So the first one here is the proper notation for this. And so we can see here for cautions, we use circles. For verbal warning for passivity and freestyle, in freestyle, we use a V. And then any passivities after that, we would use a P. And in the Greco-Roman, typically there's no warning and you just go right to the first passivity. So I just document that with a P. So we have the circles, the V, and the P for part of this. Your also ability to score right down the points, I think, is important in writing it down as you go, but 1s, 2s, 4s, and 5s. And it's also important to make sure you underline the last points that are scored. And this is particularly important if the match ends up tied. So when we see that, that's how we document that. And the last one over here to the right is looking at anytime you have a fall that occurs, circling the last points on that bout sheet that were scored. So that helps to indicate a couple of things. One, that there was a fall, and then you're showing the points that were scored directly before that. So that's just a little bit on the proper notation. The next part I want to take a look at here is, what do you do before and after a match with the bout sheet? Before the match, one of the things I would highly always recommend is making sure you check the names and the countries with the colors and the individuals that come up on the mat. This is less likely to happen at a very large event like a World Championships or a Continental, but certainly at smaller events or even national events, there's a possibility that the wrong wrestler may walk out there. They have you have 2 wrestlers with the right colors, but they may not be the right wrestlers. So it's important just to quickly check to make sure you have the right individuals available. So here today we have Vincent Aca from Ivory Coast and Yuri Meyer from Argentina. Now, once the match is done, a couple of things that I think, once you start to go through is filling this out and then making sure that this bout sheet matches that of the match chairman and judge. They both have to be in agreement with this. And it's important to do that because the UWW IT team is going to go back and take a look and make sure that the results match the bout sheet. So we want to make sure everything is correct in this process. So here's a couple of things to do. Number one, whenever the match gets done, you simply cross out the loser, whether you have 1 line across it or 2. I typically just put 1 line across. The next thing is totaling up the technical points. So making sure you have the total technical points, just adding up your scores and indicating those in those boxes. The next one is in indicating the classification points based on how the results of the match came. Then writing down and indicating the winner. Sometimes that just involves writing down the word red or blue in the process. And then also indicating the time of day that the match ended. This is particularly probably important more at the smaller events, just because the matches typically come a little bit quicker. At the big competitions, the World Championships and things like that, the matches are usually staged by times, particular towards the end with the quarterfinals happening and semifinals. So there's less chance that you're going to run into a time problem. But at a national event, that's something you have to consider, is making sure they have adequate time break between matches. Then at the bottom here, you have to circle the correct victory based on how the match ended. So in this case, this was a winner by points. Vincent won 9-8. So this was a victory by points. So we circle this one. And in this case, the Yuri was able to get 1 classification points because he scored points. So just making sure that you have and know which ones go where, and circling that correct one is important, because the technical points and classification points are all important when it comes to the placing of the wrestlers beyond 5th place. And lastly, make sure you sign the bout sheet. So at the bottom, put your signature when you get done. So again, just important, because these are just little things that help separate, some of those good from the best. Quickly, just reminders on determining the winner. Different ways we have, winners are by fall, certainly technical superiority, disqualification, injury. So those, most of these matches, when you're deciding this, are all pretty straightforward in terms of who the correct winner is. And even by points, if there's one wrestler that has 7, one wrestler has 2, everybody knows that, 7 beats 2. So that's not too difficult. But what do you do if the match is tied? So end up with the same number of points. Do you know the criteria for determining the winner? Because sometimes, if the match is really low scoring, most everybody knows who's winning the match. But certainly, whenever there's a high scoring, coaches will be like, gosh, who's winning the match? I can't remember all the points. It's like 15-15. Well, how were those 15 points scored? So I think it's important that as a referee and as coaches as well, that you know how the criteria is determined and the order for the criteria. So simply it goes, if it's tied, we start with the highest value of points first. So that's most 5s, most 4s, most 2s. So whoever has more of the higher points, they would be the winner. If those points are tied, the next step is to go to the least number of cautions. And then the last one is going to be last point scored. So if everything is tied, then it goes to last point scored. So let's take a look at a couple of situations here. So the first situation, I'm actually going to run a poll question here for you. So in situation number 1, who is the winner? Is it red or is it blue? And hopefully your screen's not blocked out, because I know sometimes when we're trying to optimize the video, certain parts get blocked out. So who is the winner here? Red or blue? So I'll give you about another 10 seconds to look at it. All right, and share. So here we go. So a majority of you have it red as the winner. And for those of you that did that, you are correct. So stop sharing the results here. So you are correct. Red is the winner because red has more 2-point actions. So they each both have a 4-point action. But in this case, Vincent has 2 2s and Yuri only has 1 2. So red would be the winner because he has more 2-point actions than Yuri does. So red is the winner in this case. All right, let's try the next one. So the second situation, who is the winner of this match? Again, a couple more seconds here. All right. So great job. So here, blue is the, majority of you have blue as the winner. And for those of you that had that, You are correct in this. Blue is the winner because red had a caution. So a lot of times we get caught off guard, and I know that sometimes even coaches, they think, well, hey, we scored last. Well, keep in mind that scoring last is the last criteria step. It's not the first. So we have to go through these other two to be able to determine who that winner is. So in this case, red had a caution, everything was tied. So Yuri is the winner, despite Vincent scoring the last point. All right, and the last one here, the third situation. Who is the winner in the third situation? A few more seconds here. All right, we'll end it. All right, a majority of you have red as the winner. And for those of you that had red as the winner, you are correct because red scored last. So in this case, everything was tied. So Vincent had 1-4, Yuri had 1-4. They both had 2 2s, and they both had one 1-point action. So as a result, it was 9-9. And because the underline here indicates that Vincent scored last, he is going to be considered the winner. So again, just remembering these and going through and practicing that some is important because a lot of times coaches may ask you quickly, like, hey, who's winning? And as a judge, you know, especially national, I'm going to tell them, hey, red's winning right now, you know, or blue's winning, because that helps them be able to identify, you know, what that strategy is that needs to be done. Because I know many of us have probably seen matches where each wrestler thought, you know, the other one was winning. So it was, you know, one wrestler was trying to score and they were actually the ones winning, and the other wrestler was just defending and they were losing, and it ended that way. So I think it's important to make sure you know that as a coach and as wrestlers as well. The next part I want to switch now is talking a little bit more about the referee and how the referee mechanics and what you do, because kind of switching gears back to, you know, what are some referee mechanics for communicating as a referee? And so, you know, I want to first there's a couple of things. First of all, our ability to be able to communicate is important. And I think when we talk about communicating, one of those things is using the correct vocabulary. And I'll go through that in more detail in a second. But another couple of things that are important with this is saying the command and color of the wrestlers. You know, for example, you know, red action and blue open. So we're using the color to indicate, you know, who needs to do what. It's just not open or it's just not action. And even probably 15, 20 years ago, I remember when I started refereeing, we actually used to say the command first and then the color. And to my opinion, it's way better to make sure you indicate the color first, because that gets the attention of the wrestler, and then you give them the command of what needs to happen. Also, another important part is using the correct hand. So whenever we're using the correct hand in this process if you're talking to the red wrestler, you should be using your red hand. For example, I'm taking a look at a picture here of Sam Julian, and I'm not sure what Sam is saying, but I know he's talking to red. And that's such an integral part of this process of, you know, because not everybody in the competition venue will be able to know what you're saying to the wrestler, but they all know who you're talking to based on your using of the correct hand when you're talking to the wrestlers. So make sure that you do that as you do that process. The next part here is the correct United World Wrestling vocabulary. So here are a list of the terms, and I put those terms in black so that, you know, you can see what those are. And then in the orange is what they basically mean. So for example, you're going to probably the most common term that's used during a match is the word action. And that's really just because we're trying to stimulate action. And as a referee, that's really one of our main points in this, is to make sure we stimulate action and scoring. Another term is contact, and that's making sure that the wrestlers take hold. So maybe they separate a lot or they're pushing away. Particularly important in Greco-Roman to have contact. If a wrestler is blocking, you know, saying open is a key word here. And you can also, in the same sense, is using the word head up, or using the words head up. And I can tell that Uwe here in this picture is indicating to the red wrestler that he wants his head up. And I know this because one, he's using his red hand, and two, he's lifting that arm up in that process. And when he does, that's telling red, head up. And so everybody in this venue, knows that that's what he's saying, even though they can't always hear him. Another key term here now is no fingers, because we have a lot of wrestlers who like to, grab the fingers, grab the hands, interlocking. So we try to indicate that by saying no fingers. If you're going to give a warning, the word for warnings is attention. So make sure that you're giving an attention when needed and using that term. Another word when you have people that aren't open or maybe they're blocking is to say no block. And that's just for people who are trying to prevent holds. Maybe they got two hands on their chest and they're preventing a wrestler from taking a hold. So you would say no block. And another term here is using the word center to indicate the wrestlers to go back to the center. A few more terms here we have is continue, and known in this picture from the Olympics. My guess is that's what she's telling red right now, because she's using her red hand and she's indicating, maybe continue to red before she stops the match and brings them back into the standing position. So, just a good look at using hands, in those positions. Place, anytime you have a wrestler that's crawling and you want them to stop crawling, you use the term place. The next word is zone, and I put this picture up here of the mat of the wrestling area, and you can see that when we talk about zone, we're talking about that passive orange zone that goes around the mat. So this area that goes all the way around this, in that 1 meter area. So when wrestlers start working towards the zone, you want to indicate that to them. So maybe it'll be red zone. Now you may follow this up. You say red zone. Red tries to circle, but blue doesn't allow them to circle back in. Then you may say blue center. So you might start with red zone and then follow up with blue center. And then the last word here is up. So anytime you finish, you up and then back to the center. So you use some of these terms very closely together, and they just indicate different parts. But nearly everybody in the world understands this terminology, and it's important to use that consistently as you go. The next part here is looking at the hand signals for the referees. There's different situations we have, and this first one up is just in fact of scoring points. So if you're scoring points, we want to make sure you display those high and be confident when scoring. We may not always get them right. I know certainly I'm probably not going to score every situation right, but I am going to put those points up there like they are 100% correct. Whether I may be off or not, I'm going to be confident when I score that. And I would encourage you to do that as a referee, is be confident in your scoring. The next part is looking at hand signals for passivity. So we're going to show some videos here in this process. And you're going to see this. The first video we're going to watch is just asking for passivity. And then we'll get into freestyle, and then we'll get another slide for Greco-Roman in terms of how we handle those. But this first video here is with Jason Bobby at the U23 World Championships, and he just does a great job here. So go back here. And so here he goes. He asks red for passivity. So notice how his arm goes straight out in that process. So he does a great job here of asking for passivity. And whether this is freestyle or whether this is a Greco-Roman, how we ask for passivity is exactly the same. So straight out, hand flat, that's a great job right here. And not only did he do a great job of just the mechanics with this, he did a great job on this match, because here he just asked for passivity for red, but just as he did, red made an action. And Jason does a great job here of not blowing the whistle directly, because he asked for passivity. He didn't blow the whistle. He waited. And because he waited, we won't see the end of this match, but I can tell you the situation. Red makes a 4-point action and gets a leg foul. So it ends up being 4 red, caution blue, and 2 red as a result of this. So he did a great job of asking, but he also made sure he kept his eyes on the athletes as he was waiting to get confirmation. So that's a great job, but a great look here of looking at what it looks like to, ask for passivity. A great job there. Now I want to get in specifically into the process here with the passivity and freestyle. And so the first time when we have a first passivity warning, we have to indicate to the wrestler that they've been warned. And so Christina does a great job here of indicating to Blue that she is being warned for passivity. And she got in front of Blue and she used that rotating hand motion here that was great and a good indicator. So one hand and a circular movement is indicating that that's the first passivity warning for that wrestler. Next is when we're putting them on activity time. And again, for those of you that were able to watch the webinar with Ibo and Nona on freestyle passivity, they discussed this as well in that webinar. And so the process now of putting the wrestler on the activity time is using two hands. Now, we do have the same blue wrestler, but we do have a different red wrestler. So this is a different match than the one you just saw. And Jeffrey Spiegel is our referee here, and he is indicating to red that red is on the activity time. And he does that by using those hands in a rotating motion. So a good look at indicating the activity time here for red. It's also important to note that once you come back and you indicate the activity time, that you check to make sure that the clock is ready for the activity time to start. Because when you blow the whistle, we need that time, those 30 seconds, to start exactly at that time. The next part here is the hand signals for passivity. And so with Greco-Roman, the asking for passivity is exactly the same as what you had before, but after you get confirmation, what you do is a little bit different than what we did for freestyle. So here's a video of Jonas from Finland at the U23s. Did a great job here of asking for passivity. He gets confirmation, he stops the match, and then gives the 1 point. And what's critical here is notice how when he does this, his hand comes up, so it's directly up, and then it is, his blue hand is up, he stops the match, and then he puts up the one red. So one hand is up, he pulls it down and puts the other hand up for the 1 point. So it's important that when we're doing passivity that we don't have both hands up at the same time. So one hand is for passivity. Once you've stopped that, you bring your hand down and then illustrate your point for that passivity. So this is in Greco-Roman. Now, why that's important is because of the next part, which is how we handle cautions. And a lot of times passivities and cautions can look the same, but what's important here is looking at whether there's points are being scored with the hand up. And as you can see in this picture to the right, the referee is holding up the caution for red and 1 point for blue. So because we have both up at the same time, I know as I'm watching this that this was a caution and not passivity. So making sure we do those hand signals correctly is an important process here. Just a quick reminder too, for freestyle women's wrestling, a large majority of the cautions are caution and 1 point. And for Greco-Roman, a large majority of the cautions are always a caution and 2 points. Now, certainly there's circumstances, one situation in each where it could be the opposite, but large majority of what we see with our cautions are going to be 1 point for freestyle and 2 points for Greco-Roman. And just a reminder too, that whenever you have standing fouls, if a foul occurs in the standing position, we restart in the standing position. And if the foul occurs in parterre, we restart in parterre. So just a good reminder of wherever the foul occurs, that's where we're going to restart the match. So let's take a look at an example here of calling the caution. So here's the finals of a competition, talk to red, and he's asking for the caution red and 1 point. So caution red, 1 point. He's asking for confirmation from the match chairman, and then we'll move forward past that. But just the process of asking and getting confirmation is a good look at that. The next part here are hand signals when we're going out of bounds. And the first part I want to focus on here is the picture in the left-hand side here is the pointing when a wrestler goes out. So in this picture, red's head is out of bounds. And Sam is pointing with his red hand that red has stepped out, or red's head is out. And now he's just waiting for blue to have the opportunity to finish the action and score more points. So when we see a wrestler step out, but the attacking wrestler is still in bounds, we want to point at it so that way everybody knows that there is a step out And now we're giving the attacking wrestler a short opportunity to finish the action and score higher points. That way we don't accidentally stop it and score 1, when maybe if we would have waited a second, we could have scored 4. So Sam did a great job with this. And here's a great video. So here is Casey Gessel, who is a member of the referee commission. This is at the World Championships in 2015. And he does a number of things great in this match. And I want to kind of highlight a couple of things with this scenario. So as we're watching this, out, okay, 1 blue. So let's go back and take a look at this again. So first thing I want you to notice that here, he notices the foul, like this leg is being bent. So he sees safety. So the first thing he does notice, he gets really close to it just in case. Okay, well, it gets a little bit better. So he backs out and he looks. The next thing, notice red's out, and notice you can see his hand is pointing out to that where red stepped out. So he's indicating to everybody in the venue right now that red has now stepped out of bounds. Now blue hasn't gone out, so he's giving blue the opportunity to finish this action. So he holds it, he waits. All right, he realizes blue isn't going to score. So then he blows the whistle, indicates that red was out of bounds, and it's 1 point for blue. So that's a great job of pointing at the action when they go out, giving a little bit of time, and then scoring the best option, whether it's just 1 point for the step out or whether it maybe turns into a 2-point or 4-point action. So it's a great video for that. Now, what I look at is just some hand signals of what happens when the wrestlers go out of bounds. And if both wrestlers go out of bounds very quickly, you know, what is the signal that we're using for this? So I think this is a great example from the, this was from the Freestyle World Cup a few years ago. And here we have Jason Flinders from Canada, you know, indicates. Now notice what I want you to look at here is notice how his hands make that sweeping motion going out. So he's out of bounds, and now he's coming up with his points and his scoring, which is most likely either going to be 1 red or 2 red, because blue went out of bounds first before he was able to come on top. So it was a secondary action. But notice the movement of the hands. The next part is there's also another way to indicate out of bounds, and this was an outstanding job of illustrating this. Because of great referee mechanics, everybody knew what got scored here. So when we watch this video, so there's a couple of things that take place here. And I'll go back through, and he just did a fantastic job with this. So first of all, this was a risk. So there was a risk involved. So there would normally in the center of the mat, this would just be no points, and we would come back to the standing position. So the first thing he's indicating is that there is no points for the action. And then as he continues, notice that now he scores 1 point, and then he's indicating that it was because it was out of bounds. And he did that by using that hand movement an angle with the line that he was out of bounds, and that's why they scored 1 point for red. So just an outstanding job of mechanics here of illustrating what that was. Next part here is looking at the start and end of matches. And really, you kind of depend on where you're at and what level of event you're at, depends on what that looks like. You know, but in general, there's a few things that should be pretty consistent with this. When you go to start a match, typically, number one, you're going to shake the wrestler's hands, you know, when they come out to start. Now, certainly, you know, maybe with COVID-19, that procedure may change. But in the past, we always shake the hands of the wrestlers when they come out to start the match. You then check with the judge and match chairman, and then the wrestlers shake hands. Now, those last 2 steps can be done really in any order. The wrestlers can shake hands, then the referee can check the judge and match chairman before starting the match, or it can be switched. The order of those 2 can happen either way. At some of the events, depends on where you're at, you may also have to check the wrestlers to make sure they're not sweating or there's not too much moisture on them, or there's not an oily substance as a result. So a lot of times you will check that before you start, or if there's a brace or things like that that you need to look at, you check those before the start of the match. At the big events like this, at the World Championships that we're going to see, these are all taken care of before the wrestlers get to the mat. So there's no need to check those when they get there. You simply shake their hands, check, you know, they shake hands, and you check the judge and match chairman. So take a look at a good video here. And it's really hard to get the video of all of this process, because when they record the matches, they're just recording the start of it. So sometimes the videos don't always catch the beginning part. But here you can see how Mr. Kovalenko does a great job here. He has the wrestlers, you know, they shake hands first, and then he has them shake. Then he checks the judge, checks the mat chairman, and then starts the match. So just a great example here of getting that started. And I'm certain that he shook the hands of both wrestlers when they came out the mat. We just don't have that part of the video. For the end of the match, it's kind of much of the same process. You know, when the match gets done, the first thing you do is you shake the wrestler's hands in that process. And then after you shake their hands, you wait, you get them on the correct side, you declare the winner, and then you make sure that the wrestlers shake hands with each other and with the coaches. And so here is a great example of this as well. So this was, you know, obviously this was a big match a few years ago at the World Championships, you know, and not only is this an all-star match, it's an all-star team, you know, referees here with Levent as the referee, Koike as the judge. I'm not sure who the match chairman was, but just looking at this video, I know this was a great, you know, going to be a great officiated match. And so take a look at how the match ends here with this. Again, he shakes wrestlers' hands. He gets them on the correct side. So notice that he got them on the correct side. So red is on the left side and blue is on their right side. So he gets them in the correct part. He then waits. He indicates the winner, and he circles them. Now notice that when he circled them to the side. So blue, the winner, is going forward. That's just a small detail that always looks great. Next thing is after he declared the winner to both sides, he then has the wrestlers shake hands, and many times I will actually pull the wrestlers together so they shake hands, and then both wrestlers go to the opposing corner to shake hands with the opposing coach. So that's the process. And also what's good about this is the event stays in the center of the mat until both wrestlers have departed the mat. Now, because this was the finals, you know, now he's going to leave the mat so that blue is able to celebrate his world championship. But normally during this time, both wrestlers would leave the mat, and then once they leave the mat, then he would depart and walk off the mat as well. So again, just a great look at procedure-wise of what the end of match should look like. The last topic here is calling the fall or pin in this process, and there's just a few things to consider. Number one is make sure you change levels as a referee. You have to get down and get to a better position. It is impossible to call a fall if you're in the standing position as a referee. Second thing is make sure you get into position. Make sure you get to the best position you can to see where the fall is. Many times that's towards the head of the athletes, but sometimes you have to just move so you can get a better angle. So get in your best position possible. The next thing you do is raise your hand and look to the mat chairman for confirmation. Remember that the mat chairman has to confirm a fall. So many times I get the position and I look directly to the mat chairman because it has to happen very quickly. And I don't want to have to be looking to the judge, then to the mat chairman, back and forth. So I just go directly to the mat chairman for this confirmation. If they confirm, blow the whistle, hit the mat, and then indicate that the match is over. So let's see a good example of this from these Olympics. He looks, indicates, again, he was in good position. He had gotten down, he checks, it's very clear. Mat chairman confirms, gets confirmation, blows the whistle, slaps the mat, and indicates that the match is over. So that's just a few of the mechanics that I think are great. And when I talk about this, I think and I'll probably reiterate this too just before, you know, kind of leave here. But if you're looking to separate, if you want to go from being one of the good referees to being one of the best referees, how you do this is by improving referee mechanics. There's certain areas between mechanics, positioning, and how you control the match that really separates whether, you know, the good from the best. And so that's what we're doing with this webinar, hopefully, is providing you with some tools to help you go from being a good referee to being one of the best referees. So I now take time to go through a few questions. And again, I apologize at the beginning part. I know that this was, the video maybe wasn't upright. So I appreciate your patience with that. And hopefully it got better as we progressively went through this. So if you have any questions, now would be a great time to would be a great time to ask, and you can simply do that by writing those down at the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So one question is, can a bee be used to note a verbal warning before caution? I typically don't do that, but if you need a reminder that somebody was warned, and simply document that on the Bout sheet. But hopefully you're able to remember that, because you can certainly have a number of different verbal warnings. You could have a verbal warning in women's wrestling, a verbal warning for grabbing the hair. There may be another verbal warning because you maybe were fleeing the hold at the end, and they stopped and gave you the warning for that. So if you have to be careful, because if you put down these, you're gonna have these all over your paper potentially if you're giving a lot of verbal warnings. So I would not recommend doing that. Next, what is the correct hand mechanics for a caution? Request a caution with a horizontal arm, and then arms go up if confirmed. Yeah, usually a lot of times it's a great question. I think the first time the hand goes out, just like passivity and caution is kind of the same. The hand goes out straight across. Once you get confirmation, a lot of time, let me go back and start over here. If I'm going to give a caution and it's in the standing position, I always stop the match to ask for the caution. Because if I'm stopping the match in this situation because maybe they did something, maybe there's a headbutt, whatever that is, in a standing position, I will nearly every time, I'm going to blow the whistle, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask for the caution. Because if I stick my hand out, that looks just like passivity. So there has to be a difference, for people to see. And so a lot of times I will blow the whistle and I will ask for the caution. So my hand goes out to the side and the point comes up, or 2 points, depending on the match. That's typically what I'll do for that. Now, if there's a foul that particularly occurs like in the parterre position, then I'm going to stick the hand out and get confirmation. So it'll look a little bit like passivity. But we know as wrestlers in the wrestling community and as referees that there's no passivity in parterre. So if you're asking and sticking that hand out, that's clearly going to be a caution. Because what you don't want to do is stop the match when they're in parterre, because you may take away a scoring opportunity. So often if there's a foul, you'll point at it and then you'll ask. So there's a little bit different mechanics based on whether it's standing position or whether it's in parterre. So this is a great question. In a standing position, I am blowing the whistle and I'm asking for the caution and point. I'm sticking the hand out and I'm putting that point up, as they go. Then I may bring that hand up if I get confirmation from the match chairman. If they don't confirm it, that's okay. Give another warning and then continue wrestling again. But if the wrestler's in parterre, I'm going to ask for it with the hand out. I'm going to point at the foul. I'm going to ask for it to get confirmation with the match chairman before I stop that situation. So a little bit different in that procedure. So next question, when looking for confirmation from the match chairman for a pin, does a referee have to raise the hand of the color of who is going to win by pin? I would say no. It's great if you can think about it, but a lot of times you're going to react really quickly because you see it. And because I'm right hand dominant, I'm dominant with my right hand, I'm pretty much always probably going to come up with my right hand as a result of that. But if you can ask with the correct hand, that's even better. But I just know that when that situation happens, you're not even going to think about which hand's going up, and nor should you. So a lot of times you're going to go with whatever your dominant hand is in that situation. Next question, can the match chairman or judge get up and move for a better view where there is a pin? I think, sometimes that's a great question, Carlos, from that. I guess getting from my opinion, I know as a judge, I'm not going to be able to see the perfect position every time. And certainly as a match chairman, that's even more difficult because of the amount of stuff that's there. You have the table help, you have the camera, you have the video review, you have just a lot of stuff. So it's impossible to really get up. So no, I would never get up and try to get a better view of the pin. I'm going to rely on that referee to be in the great position. I'm going to rely on the judge, if I'm the match chairman, to indicate, if they clearly it's not a fall, they should indicate very quickly that that's not a fall and give the white palette. But I am going to stay seated in those positions. I'm not going to get up and be looking around and moving. And I've seen a number of, some different competitions I've been in where people are literally, the judge is up and looking, I'd stay seated. I think it looks professional. and the referee's there, and hopefully between the three of you have a great angle. And as a match chairman, if the referee's in great position and they see and they're looking at it, sometimes you're confirming. You may not be able to see the exact ball, but you certainly are going to confirm that they're in a great position and that they saw that ball. But you do want to make sure that they are pinned, because there's no ability to challenge by the competitor. So you certainly want to make sure they're pinned, and you also want to make sure that you don't miss a fall as a result of that too, because that's a way that maybe a wrestler is losing that could win a match had they been in the best position to see that. But it does have to be, the match chairman cannot call a fall by themselves. Next one, for a caution point, is it better for your hands at top of your head or inside your body at the same time? I think anytime I'm given a caution, at some point my hand is going to be out, straight out my body, and then that point is going to be up. A lot of times I do that. Then once I get confirmation, I might bring that up so that the two are together, but they're both above my head. I don't like to keep things, scoring inside my body. I'm going to score things with confidence, and things are going to be very deliberate. Movements are going to be they're going to snap. A lot of times when you're doing things, like, you don't want to kind of just slow movements. You want your hands to snap and move and then get up. A lot of times I'll kind of extend that elbow and then extend it upward as you go. But certainly, the tops of your hands, like the only time my hand's going to be flat, and the only time is if I come up and I bring it up, where you're going to see the bottom of my hand. Outside of that, it's going to be straight out across, and then outside again above, scoring the points above my body for sure. One thing that I would mention too in this is, I didn't bring this up, and I probably should. This is just, maybe it's a personal preference, but I am a huge believer of holding your whistle in your hand. So if I want to talk to blue, I'm going to hold it with my red hand, with my left hand, and I'm going to talk to blue. If I want to switch, I'm going to switch and have that whistle in my hand as I'm talking. And the reason why I always keep the whistle in my hand is because if I need to blow it, it's already in my hand. I can put it in my mouth and blow it quickly. If it's hanging down below me, some people just like to walk around with it down below, and that's a personal preference. For me, like, I don't want to have to figure out where it's at, grab it, and then try to get it in my mouth. So I always hold it. So you probably will rarely ever see me not holding the whistle, unless I have to call a caution and use two hands in the process. If not, almost one hand is always going to be on the whistle. And if I drop it for a second, I'll have it back up very quickly. Next one, we're using a lot of hand signals when giving an attention to the wrestler too. Could you mention some examples, like no fingers, head up, no block? I think great question, Christina. When you're looking at, when you're doing stuff like I mentioned, Uwe did a fantastic job in it. And again, if you want to learn, like probably one of the best ways to learn referee mechanics is just get online and watch the big matches and watch the referees that are in them. There's a reason why they're there. That's how I learned to go into the competitions. Many times I would just literally be sitting, you would work twice an hour, maybe as a referee in those positions at those big events. So a lot of times you're watching a lot of matches, and watching the best work, you can pick up on the mechanics they do, and it's so great. Uwe did a great job when he kind of lifted his hand up, and I'm gonna have to probably, to illustrate some of this, just because of the screen background, I'll probably take off my background here real quick, just to be able to show a little bit better here. So in this process, so as you're looking, you mentioned, so one time as he mentioned, like, head up, he lifted that hand up. So I think that's a great one. Anytime I'm saying, like, red, no fingers, sometimes I'll just grab my hands, like I'll say red, red, no fingers, and I'll indicate this with that part. That way everybody knows in that situation that, hey, you're grabbing the fingers. Sometimes, people will hold their hands like, red, open, no block. It kind of just depends on what you're comfortable with. There's not a set signals for indicating those things. But certainly if you can indicate, as you're talking to them, if it's just action, you're talking to them. But if there's something that you need to do, where you stop them and have to give a warning, that's often where I'll use those additional hand signals. Like, I'll say, hey, you got to take hold. Like if it's your warning for fleeing the hold at the end, and you're saying, hey, attention, contact, you have to take hold. I'll actually hold my hands like this, like you have to take hold. That way everybody knows that's what I'm talking about. So I think that's just one of those things, like as you get more experience, you just get accustomed to seeing certain situations, and I think that's where you want to get to it. Carlos had another one, so can we congratulate the winner? I think from a standpoint, like, it's, if they jump up and I've seen it where the wrestler has jumped up and gave the hug of the referee, and that's okay. The excitement of the match is great. I think a lot of times, I'll simply just say congratulations or good job, when I'm shaking the hand before I raise the hand. And that's typically where my congratulation part's going to end. So then I declare the winner, have them shake hands, and make sure I follow that proper procedure. But I will simply say, hey, great match, when I'm shaking the hand of the winner. And even sometimes the loser, like, hey, that was a great match. And I'll just kind of like, as I'm helping them up, sometimes they're down and you're helping them up, pulling them up in that process, and just like, hey, great effort, in that process. But I wouldn't like, giving hugs and shaking hands and doing those things as a result. Please demonstrate standing during bout question points indicating by the referee. Not quite sure that question. It says, please again demonstrate standing during about question points indicating by the referee. Yeah, I think anytime you're scoring the points, you're just putting the points up, and maybe I'm off on the answering the question, but you're putting those hands up in the air. And a lot of times, so there's 1, there's 2, 4, and then 5, and I'm going to put those up as high as I can. A lot of times when I score 2 points, I actually like put that hand up and I kind of pop it up, so it's just like this. It's almost like at 90 degrees, and like I'm kind of shooting a gun up in the air in that process. So kind of the same process, but that's how I would indicate the points with that. When is one caution we need to write? That's correct. So, Paul, great job. Good reminder. In Greco-Roman, because of the leg fouls, the rule is that if you have 2 defensive leg fouls, that you have, it's automatic disqualification for the wrestler if it's defensive leg fouls. So when that happens in your circle, so when you draw a circle for the caution, you'll then put an L inside of it to indicate that that was a caution by a leg foul. So that way you remember, hey, they've had 2 cautions from leg fouls. It's automatic disqualification. So Paul, again, another great referee from Hungary. So good. Thanks for the reminder on that. If a referee and judge make a wrong decision as a match term, what can you do? You have a consultation. If it's a critical aspect of the match, like if you think maybe it was an out of bounds situation and you thought it was 2 blue and they scored 1 blue, you know what? That's their opinion, and the wrestlers have the opportunity to challenge. If it's a clear mistake that's going to have an impact on the match where they scored 4 blue and it was 4 red, then as a match chairman, you should call a consultation, call them over, discuss why it should be 4 red, and then get the correct call. Next question, and I'm going to go just through a couple more questions because we're right at the hour mark. So again, I appreciate there's lots of questions and great stuff. So if the referee gives passivity to a wrestler with confirmation from judge or match chairman, Greco-Roman, at the same time the passive wrestler steps out from the zone, then will be the score only the step out or the passivity point. I think there's so much timing with that process, but that's probably something I'll get clarification on, and you certainly can email me on that one, because I think it kind of depends, how long that happens. If I'm asking for passivity and then points get scored, then I score the points and the passivity typically goes away at that point. I'm not going to go 1 point, okay, and passivity 1 point. Now we're putting you down and doing that process all because is that sequence. But that's certainly a valid question, and I'll try to get clarification from that on how the best way to handle that. Anastasia, you're right. I think I just covered your question about the L inside the circle. Last question, sometimes match chairman calls one or both wrestlers to warn them for incorrect behavior. Do you think that by doing that, the referee loses some authority? I think it's better. It's certainly anytime there has to be a really bad situation for the match chairman to stand up and start talking to the athletes Typically, the first thing I would do as a match chairman, just from a procedural standpoint, is call over the referee, have a word with the referee, make sure that they understand what they need to have, and then send them back out, because I think it's important for them to, be the one, because they should be, they really are controlling how that match goes out on the mat, and the mat chairman is there to make sure that things go correctly. And I think the best option would probably be to call them over first, say, hey, you need to talk to Red, about keeping their head up. And I know sometimes as a mat chairman, I'll speak to them as they're walking. I'll be like, keep Red's hands out of their face. Watch Red's hands, because that will help the referee be able to indicate that better without the mat chairman having to get up and involved and start yelling at the wrestlers for whatever they're doing or not doing. So I don't think that is a great view. And I don't think that's great, in terms of, how the matches look. I think that's something that we need to, take a look at, I think, and really just, if there needs to be a better way to be able to do that. And I think simply starts by just calling them over, telling them what you want, and then going back out there to make sure that they talk to the wrestlers directly as they go. So I'm just kind of end it at that point. We're a little bit over an hour now, so I know there's certainly a lot of questions that a number of you have brought up, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time to do that. So just a quick reminder, we went through, I think being able to fill out the bout sheet correctly is important. Communicating with the wrestlers, again, just an important part of this process. Being able to use correct hand signals. We went through a variety of those. You must start and end matches correctly, and then following the correct fall procedures. And why all these things are important is because it's so important to have a uniform referee mechanics across the board, because you want people to be able to watch a match and know exactly what those hand signals and what those things are being done by the referee, because they may not always be able to hear you. Maybe there's an announcer, commentating the match, but they can clearly tell, what it is you're saying, or just based off of what you're doing with your hands and the signals that you're illustrating. So it's very important that we have uniform referee mechanics. And certainly there's a whole nother set of mechanics that when involving injuries. I saw a question with that part of how do you indicate an injury. Depending on what happens with the injury, how you're calling timeout, that's a whole nother process of hand signals that we could go through in that process. But we focused mostly just on the refereeing part today. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. So I appreciate it, and I certainly appreciate all of the comments and those of you that joined in and the reminders in that process. And certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I should have had my email address up, but it's Zach, .Arid at UnitedWorldWrestling.org, and you can find that on the United World Wrestling website as well. Feel free to email me at any time, and I'll certainly help any way I can in any process. And hopefully look forward to seeing everybody in a couple of weeks. We'll be back at it. And next one we'll be looking at is referee positioning. And I think, again, when you're talking about trying to go from being a good referee to being one of the best referees, these are some topics that we're talking about that really, in my opinion, elevate that referee to the next level. The best referees are the ones doing this. And in the meantime, I would encourage you, just go pull out some big matches where the referees are out there. Watch how they refereed it. Watch their mechanics, what they did, because that's a great way to learn. So thanks again, and I appreciate everybody being here, and hope everybody stays safe.